start chuckling in the background, saying, "Who? What coup? I was there. I signed the papers. Nobody had a gun to my head and everything." I'm going to turn it over either to Tom or Bruce and let them explain what is going on.
Okay, is this one going? Yeah. You should be confused because we are too. And what actually has happened is the organization has never changed from the AWA association. And when the separation of management took place, it was really just to make the board meetings a little shorter because they were going from noon till 5 o'clock because we were planning conferences and talking about publication and all the other things that probably should be done in a committee session rather than in a meeting or an annual meeting or whatever. In order to solve some other problems, and I point them out, I think the first annual meeting that I attended, somebody got up and announced that this was illegal and we hadn't done things that we should have done. And that was a sign to me that we really had to keep up with the modern times. We're no longer in Bruce Kelly's garage. We're 50 years later, the laws of the state of New York have changed, the laws of the US and EPA and all these kind of things have changed. And we weren't really keeping up with them. We weren't announcing meetings to the entire membership in a proper time. We weren't following New York State statutes. So with that wake-up call, we realized there were things we had to do both with the Secretary of State and with the Board of Regents, who controls New York museums and is probably the most complex of any regents in the United States because there are more per capita museums of all sorts. So in that interim, we were correcting ourselves, and we hired a not-for-profit attorney that was right up to date with the latest laws. And the recommendations were that we separate the two issues, the Secretary of State issue and the Board of Regents Museum issue, so that we could handle them separately. Now, doing that meant that we had to have two organizations, we had to have two secretaries, two treasurers, two presidents, etc. And that's where we got in a little bit of a problem because we didn't have people that were readily available, that were able to do the job, or that were familiar with what needed to be done. And in one case, I took over for a treasurer who had some health problems, and we realized that the publisher hadn't been paid or got a bad check for the OTB. And by the time I drove to his house to find out what was going on, I found 300 dues checks that had never been deposited in the bank, several months of bank statements that hadn't been delivered to the accountants and things like that. And during that next year, I acted, even though legally I wasn't supposed to act that way, but I did the accounting work for keeping us up to date and getting us through the conference, etc. There were some other things that came up more recently when we were trying to close the deal on the annex being sold to Bloomfield. We discovered that the original deed had never been filed by our volunteer attorney. And even, what age is he now, 92 or something like that? Somewhere in there. But he volunteered to take the proper papers over and make good in Canandaigua at the court and solve the problem. But that's another wake-up call that we have to really know what we're doing and do it properly. So The third thing I discovered was when I was doing this accounting work is that we pay for an accountant bookkeeper, but we have never taken any advice from the auditing portion of the firm that we use, and that was really just to save some money. But there are a number of things, including the proper tax returns that have to be filed for a nonprofit, that need to be done in a timely fashion and done properly. So many of these things have been corrected at this point, and the decision was made that, we really would work much better if we recombined the two managements and maybe set up some committees to save the time in these board meetings. Distinction. And in trying to put it back together, first of all, we probably had too many board members to combine, and we would have created another confusion. So we've separated, and I think when I asked Jeff the other day on the phone, he and I went through the list of people who were not on the board anymore and determined that many of them had stepped down for health reasons, had moved out of state or whatever. And because I thought we tried to incorporate anybody that was active and had historical knowledge, that had skills that could be used to manage the organization. And but I guess the rumor got started that we let all sorts of people go. But in talking to them, there's nobody that seems to be feeling that way. All of the board members, when we held the meetings that led up to this, were participating either by telephone conference call or in person, with one exception, and I'm not sure what the reason for that was. But he was scheduled to be with us by phone, but something else might have come up. So that's the background of it. Now, we took the votes and we did everything that the minutes had to say to recombine the organization, but it was subject to the approval of the Board of Regents before it could take place, and this is still true. It also would have been subject to the approval of the membership in November, and that would be almost a proxy type vote like we have presently for board members, but it would probably contain more explanation in detail of just what's going on and some of the things that I'm telling you. Well, lo and behold, we started to pursue the Board of Regents, and we're told that there's a permanent hold on recombining museum-type organizations because of some problem they have with another group that's attempting to recombine and has some problems with internal revenue. And therefore, they couldn't tell us, how soon can this go through. It wasn't, I thought at first it was, they had to wait for the fall meeting or something like that, but no, it's permanently on hold. Our attorneys tell us that we can accommodate what we want to do in a different sort of way, but it would require us holding 3 more meetings, a meeting of the AWA, meeting of the museum, and a meeting of the combined new board. And we're working on that and looking to see what can happen, but that's why we don't know quite where we were. And of course, in the meantime, the little editorial that I put out